Hello and welcome to my Bard DPS build video. I'm going to be showcasing two builds. One of them is with Raptor and one of them is without Raptor. So starting off with the non-Raptor build, first off my gear. I have the Serene Hood of the Dragon Hunter. This comes from Ancient Dragons and it gives us 10% critical strike and max stacks. After that we have the Tactful Leathers of the Dragon Hunter, which is also Ancient Dragons. This comes with 7.5% critical strike and critical severity. And then Viscerous Guards of the Precipitation, which gives us 7,500 power rating. This comes from Hardcore Voss. And then we've also got the Wasteland Wanderers from Hardcore Voss. This gives 5% combat advantage when you're close, which is pretty much all the time. And then on the right side, I use the Demogorgon set bonus, which is no longer obtainable, but you can instead use the Mythalar set bonus. This one is obtainable after 3 weeks of completing the newest Dragonbone Veil campaign, and it is a good alternative. Either set will work, but I feel that the Demogorgon set bonus does slightly more damage, just overall, both in dungeons and trials. After that, we've got the two rings. I use the Red Eyes Glare. This comes from the Voss End chest. And then I use the Band of Air still. This one I feel is actually stronger than other potential rings that you could use, on the Bard at least. So that's why I'm still continuing to use it. I use the 5% combat advantage shirt. This can be bought off the auction house for around 1000 AD, so it's very easy. And then I use the legendary pants, which give 2400 critical strike rating. These are obtainable from Ancient Dragons once again. For the primary artifact, you can use any debuff artifact. I would recommend either the Dragonbone Blades, the Mythalar's Fragment, the Halaster Blast Scepter, or if we go into my bank, I've got the Heart of the Black Dragon, Thirst, Charm of the Serpent, or the Lantern of Revelation. For our secondary artifacts, one of them you want to be your set bonus, which is also a debuff. The Demogorgon's Reach is another good one. And then two high item level, 1200 item level artifacts. So you could also use the Mythalar's Fragment if you want. It's just dependent on what stats you need. Or you could use 3 journals in your secondaries, but I feel that not using journals is better for the team overall, because you have more artifact selections. And then for our main hand and offhand, we of course use the Mastercraft weapons. I just always have them equipped because there's no reason to buy or equip another weapon set like the Mirage or the Lionheart weapons when Mastercraft is better and they're typically cheaper. For our offhand modifications, we use the Forte and Critical Strike, and then we use 10% damage done by Staccato. Next is enchantments. We use 4 Jade enchantments for critical strike and 4 Amethyst defense enchantments, but you could also use the defense enchantments, the 4 Garnets in the defense slots. We use 1 Garnet as our utility slot for Forte. We use the movement bonus, but you could also use the action point bonus if you want. But I just always have movement speed in because it's just better in general to be able to get to the mobs quicker. And then I use the Poison Thorn combat enchantment, which is still the best one just in general. And then we of course use Rage of Flames and Devil's Precision, but you could switch out Rage of Flames for a Dragon Slayer overload if you're killing dragons, of course. Next up is our boons. So the ones to prioritize, you want to first go for power, and then maximum hit points, and then movement speed. And then for our tier 5 boons, we go for Forte and action point gain. And then we go for Bloodlust and Master boons. The secondary boons to sort of think about or to get if you have enough boon points are all of the offensive boons, so critical strike, critical severity, combat advantage, and accuracy. And then I also went for a few of the mastery boons on the right side. So the ones I would prioritize are damage versus fiends, damage resistance and damage versus undead, and then damage versus cultists. And I wouldn't really about dinosaurs because there aren't very many areas that have dinosaur enemies. I also went for a few points in awareness, and if you have more points then you can go for defense. But I wouldn't worry about getting any points in deflect or crit avoidance because they're pretty null in comparison to these two defensive stats. Guild Stronghold boons, we use movement speed or revive sickness, and then you can either use defense or awareness, and then we use power as our offensive boon. But that's just dependent on your stats. For companions, I use the Pseudo Dragon as the summon companion, but for AoE you could use the Regis companion or a Succubus companion, or the Mystic Fiora is also decent. But I just pretty much always have Pseudo Dragon summoned because AoE doesn't really matter that much. And then for equipment, we use the 1950 Combat Advantage piece. This comes from the Shattered Diamond boxes. Ivy-Grown Grimoire, which comes from Master Expeditions, and the Blessed Sword Knot, which comes from the Zerial campaign, or Battle Pass. And then we use Acute Senses Combat Advantage. For our companion bonuses, we use Batiri, damage versus bosses, Minsk, damage versus strong enemies, Black Dragon Ion Stone, Mercenary, and the Golden Cat. Or of course you could use another combat advantage piece for this one. I believe the Staldorf gives combat advantage as well. For mounts, I use the Giant Toad Tongue Lash, of course, or you could, for AoE, you could use something else that does good AoE damage, like the Wings mount or the Flying Carpet. And then I use combat advantage as my equip bonus. For our insignias, I use primarily brutality and dominance, but you could also use whatever stats you need, but this is how I built my character. And I use a few skills as well. Insignia bonuses, we use 2 Assassin's Covenants, 2 Combatants Maneuver, and 1 Gladguile. And then for our encounter powers, or our mount collars, we use encounter power damage, movement speed, outgoing healing, but you could also use stamina gain one if you have it, rough astral diamonds, and critical severity. And then that's pretty much the entire non-raptor build. I will quickly show off my stats and show you what my stat bonuses are. So my critical severity will proc up to 90% with the chest plate. My critical strike will proc up to 90% with the chest plate and the helmet procced. Combat advantage will proc up to around 84.5% roughly, but it will be about 89.5% with the tutor in the group, which should always be in the group. And power will proc up to 90% with a runic aura and with these arms procced. So I will quickly try to get roughly some of those stats if I can. Oh, combat advantage. So critical strike will proc up to about 88 to 89. Combat advantage, you can see, is just below 85, which it would be just below 90 with the tutor. Power is capped, and accuracy doesn't really matter. But now, I will go quickly show the raptor build, which is slightly different. So, the gear-wise, what I switch is I switch the chest plate for the accuracy combat advantage chest plate, which is also from Ancient Dragons. I also use the damage and damage resistance gloves, which is also Ancient Dragons. And then I use the critical strike ring, which is also from Ancient Dragons. For enchantments, instead I use 2 cobalt, 2 jade, and everything else is exactly the same. Companions, I use these 2 pieces. These come from the Chronic Eldegon Master or from the Adventure for the Dragonbone Veil. And I use the same Shattered Diamond combat advantage piece. Acute Senses once again. And then slightly different companions. I use the Batiri, the Minsk, the Raptor, of course. A 3rd damage companion, which we could either use the Neverwinter Knight or the where is it? Or the Dragon Hunter for damage versus dragon creatures, and the Alchemist as our 5th companion. And then for mounts, I use slightly different bonuses. I use 3 Assassin's Covenants, but it's only 250 extra ratings, so it's not that big a deal. And I use slightly different insignias, but it's just based off of what stats I actually need. Of course, once again, combat advantage and giant toad. And then for my stats, I'm standing at 90% critical severity. My power is at 90% with a runic aura and all 5 raptors. My critical strike procs up to just below 90. It's about 86% with the head fully procced. So it's not quite as high as the other loadout, but 86% is still very good. And then my combat advantage procs up to about the same as the other loadout, about 84.7% roughly. So let me quickly try to get those stats. Or at least the combat advantage stat. So there's combat advantage at 84.7. And critical strike is very hard to proc nowadays with the band of air hitting so much lower, but it can proc roughly to about 84 to 86% more often than not with a full group in a trial. And once again, power is capped with 5 raptors, so I can't really show that right now. After that, I will quickly go over the powers and the rotation of Bard DPS. So for bosses, well, I use the exact same powers and the exact same everything for dungeons, AoE, and bosses. So nothing changes, it's just a slightly different combat strategy that changes. So I use Staccato as my primary at-will, Konmodo as the secondary at-will, Lunge, Dancing Lights, and Ad Libitum as the 3 encounters. I use Inspiration as the daily that I pretty much always use, but Lore is another option. I have 4 of these songs pinned, not in a quick play slot, but there's only 2 of them that I really play, and that is Tailwind Mambo and Bow to the Hero. The other 2 don't really matter that much, so you can just disregard them for now. And then I use Mystifying Strikes and Masterful Performance at all times, and then my 5 boons are all up. So let me quickly explain some of these things. So the first boon doesn't really matter at all, you can just disregard that. It's just a placeholder. The second boon point will make it to where when you use an AoE at-will, you will buff your single target at-wills by 20% for 12 seconds, and vice versa. Which means you want to use your AoE at-will Con Elemento, or Konmodo, as it was before, every 12 seconds, or every 13 seconds roughly, and that will buff the staccato damage, which is what we're going to be using pretty much all the time, by 20% extra damage. So that's how that works. Ballad Calavoce, this will increase our party's damage and damage resistance and healing by 5% for 15 seconds after we play a song not in a quick play slot. Well, it's specifically Bow to the Hero or Bow to the Witch. So everybody will gain those bonuses based off of their role. And then we've got Redoublement. This one just increases a little bit extra damage, but you can really pick either of these. Either of them will work, but it's pretty much a toss-up. I feel Redoublement's a little bit more damage though. And then the 5th feat will make it to where when you use At Will and Counter Powers, you have a 10% chance to gain one of your encounter powers randomly activated again, or you will gain the cooldown back. And this version of that encounter power is about half as much damage. So if it's 400 magnitude, it's actually 200 magnitude when it's improvised, as it says. And same with this one, when it's 700, it's actually 350 magnitude, and so on and so forth. There's also a couple things down here. So when you play a song not in a quick play slot, you gain 10% critical severity for 10 seconds, and that goes to your stats. But you don't want to cap your stats based off of this, because that's not going to be up terribly often. But this one is actually pretty good. When you play a song in combat not in a quick play slot, you gain 10% extra damage for 10 seconds. So I will show the rotation now real quick. So we start off outside of the fight with Tailwind Mambo, which is that top song there on the list. And it will be up for 72 seconds. And this will gain 20% extra, or 20 extra magnitude on At Will and Encounter powers. And all of the damage is converted to projectile damage. And it increases your damage by an extra 2%. Or, well, technically 4% because your damage is converted to projectile damage. So you gain 4% and allies gain 2% extra damage over the duration of the song. And then when you enter the fight with full performance, you want to start off by playing Bow to the Hero, Artifact, Daily, At Will, and then just use your encounter powers when they're off cooldown. Tunnel Vision, and then R1 once again. Now I will quickly explain what that last R1 was. So, Bow to the Hero lasts for 20 seconds and it will give you 100 magnitude on every At Will and encounter that you use over the duration. And your R1 or tab mechanic will switch to Hero's Finale. And when you press it again on the target, it will deal 800 magnitude and cancel Bow to the Hero. And also cancels the feat, the bonus of this feat. So what I like to do is I usually like to use that while artifacts are still debuffing the target, so that this 800 magnitude extra hit will be mostly buffed by the artifacts. But I still try to get the most benefit out of it as I can. So I usually try to play it, or try to use that power when there's about 5 seconds or 7 seconds left. So Artifact, At Will, and then encounters, so on and so forth, Tunnel Vision. And then look at the timer there ticking down, and then Hero's Finale, there we go. And then just keep using your powers, so on and so forth. Just off cooldown. At Will again. Remember to use that At Will about every 15 seconds roughly. And what I like to do is once my Tailwind Mambo gets down to about 30 seconds, I like to use it again. And then that way it will be up for the next artifact call. And when the next artifact call comes, I can go ahead and use Bow to the Hero once again. Artifact, daily, blah blah blah, so on and so forth. And then just repeat this whole rotation over and over again. Or at least the song rotation. And that's pretty much it. If you want to be more supportive to the team, instead of using inspiration, you can use the lore, because this will make the target take 10% more critical hits, or your critical severity will be improved by 10%, and this goes over your 90% limit. So it's technically a debuff to the target. But that's pretty much it. I don't think there's anything else to explain. That's the DPS Bard. So, thank you for watching, and I hope this helped anyone.